Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on.
Okay, so one of my mutual friends that is not my friend no more because of this situation, I told her to hit me up with one of her friends at school because I thought he was cute. So, of course, I made my friend show him pictures of me because I'm a plus size girl. And I know for a fact some guys do not like bigger girls. And he was one of them. So we talked for a couple of days and decided to meet up at Beat Ups. And he was kind of cute. So I was like, damn. In my head, I was like getting butterflies and stuff. But when he looked at me, he had that look. That, damn, this bitch is big. Like, big, fat look. And, like, that shit just made me insecure throughout the whole date. Okay, so we're waiting for our food. And we're just sitting there in awkward silence. So I try to start small conversation, small talk. But he does not want to talk to me at all. Part 2. Okay, part 2 for the worst date ever in my entire life. Okay, so our food finally comes and we eat, but we don't talk still. We just stare at the TVs that they have at Beat Ups. And I'm just sitting there eating, and then he's on his phone, and then he tells me, hey, I gotta go. Being the girl that I am, I offered to pay his food. And, he said yeah, and I was like, okay, I'll fucking pay for your food. And then he literally just upped and left. Like, he just fucking left. So I was like, okay. But later that day, I figured out that he blocked me. And then I asked my friend, I don't know why he blocked me. So she went to go talk to him. And then she comes back texting me saying that he doesn't like bigger girls. I mean, like, I'm fine with that. But, like, honey, you could have just told me yourself. And then I'm just sitting there like, he isn't shit and stuff like that. And I was like, fucking sad. But my friend that hooked me up with him was defending him. Again, no, she's a bigger girl too. And I was like, you do not need to be my friend no more. So I cut that bitch off.
Tell me about the worst date you've ever been.
Gosh, there was so many terrible ones. How do you choose the absolute worst? Well, this was a low light. Okay, so it's years ago. I'm online dating here in LA. I meet with a guy at a bar that he chose that was close to him. Far drive for me. What a gentleman. A few minutes in, I said, hey, on your profile, you said you've been to Thailand. That's cool. I've always wanted to go. And he was like, it's a bit of a different trip for a man to go to Thailand than a woman. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he was like, do you really want to know? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And he was like, you can get really good hand jobs there for $15. So I made a face. And then he said, don't make that face. They're well taken care of. Well taken care of. Then he asked if I would give him a hand job. I said no. He got the check. We'd only had one sip out of our drinks. When we got to the door, he asked if I would give him a ride to his car, which was a block and a half away. And that was the end of that. Years later, I told this story on a talk show. He found one of my fan pages on Facebook and sent it a message saying, hey, heard you tell that story. Nice that you exaggerated the truth. Ha ha, whatever. Anyway, I wrote a web series. Would you mind watching it and giving me some notes? That, ladies and gentlemen, is dating in LA.
Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on.
Right, I've turned up to a date once and the girl immediately started laughing at my trousers. She's like, oh my God, why didn't you just wear denims? We sat down at a table. She told me that I had dry skin and that at 5'8" I was too short, even though she knew this beforehand. She then took a newspaper from the next table, started reading it, like, tell me something interesting about you. I proceeded to tell her that I spent my teenage years in children's homes. And she said, oh my God, that is so depressing. You're so miserable. I said, look, I'm going to leave now. We stood outside. I went to phone a taxi. And she said, why don't you just phone one from my house in the morning? Like, why do some people think, like, lowering your self-esteem is some sort of brilliant reverse psychology that's going to make you interested in them? I just went, look, you can shove that taxi right.
Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on.
So I was seeing this guy and I went over to his house and he's like, I'm going to make a great dinner for you. I was like, awesome, cool, love dinner, great. And so we were at his house and I was like, where's the food? And he was like, oh, well, I just got some snacks. So when he lied to me about dinner, I was like, okay, cool, I can fuck on some snacks, like some hors d'oeuvres. And so then he brings out a bowl of Doritos and Cheetos mixed together and was like, I hope you like them. I left shortly after, so.
Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on. Here's mine.
So I had this really big dude ask me out on a date. And before y'all say anything, I'm a big girl myself, but this guy was probably pushing 500 pounds. But I gave him a chance, because I'm not judgmental. So he took me to CC's Pizza. We walk in, everybody knows him by name. They're high-fiving him and shit. We sit down. This motherfucker ate 8 plates of pizza before they brought him his usual, which was 2 more pizzas, which he proceeded to fold double, and then he wrapped them up in a napkin and he put them down his pants and he was putting them in his pocket. He said he was taking pizza home to his grandma who didn't have money for groceries. We went back to his house and his grandma was outside, and I said, hey, he's got your food. She said, honey, his parents have had to refinance their house to feed his big ass. You need to run like hell now. Needless to say, that was the first and the last date. Worst date ever.
Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on. Here's mine. 2 years ago, I went out with a pilot from Bumble. When I got there, he said, I hope it didn't take you too long to get here. I said, no, 15 minutes. I walked. He said, good, because I don't date people who live more than a mile from me. He then asked the hostess for a table for 2 and said, you have to eat with me, even though he knew I had already eaten. He proceeds to force me to pick out an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. We are there for 2 hours. I am barely eating because, again, I have already eaten, which he shames me for, and then asks me to split the bill. At that point, I wanted to get out of there, so I just did it. We're putting on our coats. It's February, by the way. He pulls on black leather gloves and says, these are my murder gloves. He then insists on walking me home, meaning he continues to walk next to me even though I continue to ask him not to. At one point, I tried to turn on a street that wasn't mine, and he said, we haven't walked 15 minutes yet. This isn't where you live. There's a doorman building next to my building, and I walked in with a big smile on my face and said, this man outside is stalking me. Please pretend I live here. And this has been today's episode of Things Women Do to Avoid a Confrontation That Might Lead to Murder. Tell me about the worst date you've ever been on. Here's mine.
So I picked this girl up from her house for our first date many years ago. Getting to head into a Mexican restaurant about 10 minutes from her house. Conversation to the restaurant is great. We get to the restaurant, they seat us, we're having a good time. We order our food. About halfway through the meal, she goes, take me home now. You okay? She said, take me home. We jump in the car, heading back to the house. About 5 minutes before we get to the house, I hear, whee! What was that? She said, I'm so sorry. Her face turned as red as my hoodie. This lady had past gas. It sounded like a parrot was giving birth to a squirrel. Well, the smell come and it smelled like fresh baby shit. She rolls her window down and starts gagging. I'm trying not to make a scene because I know she's mortified. I'm gagging because she's gagging and the smells got off. We get to the house, pull up. I jump out to help her out. She darts from my car. She can't make it to the house, stops by her bushes and just dumps everything. To this day, she has refused to text me or call me.